say is, so listen up. There's a trick in photography and filming called tight framing or tight camera shots. We'll go over positive applications and then the negative deceptive applications. Tight framing has different applications. One is creating a visual appearance of infinity. For example, you take photos of a 40-foot flower bed, and in the photo you can see the borders of the flower bed. People can see that the entire body of flowers is not that big. But if you do a tight shot of the flowers without showing the borders, it creates an illusion of infinity, that the flowers may actually be larger in quantity than they actually are. Another example is if you are standing on a beach with two shorelines. You take a photo of a boat about 80 feet out with the shoreline in the shot, people can see the boat isn't far away. But if you take the shot of the boat without the shoreline, it looks like the boat photo was taken in the middle of the ocean. That's the illusion of infinity. One other use of this technique is to conceal certain body parts of a model. If you only want the visual focus to be on a certain portion of someone's body, then you would take a tight frame excluding the rest of them, like a torso body shot, or a model shot of someone wearing a belt buckle. You don't want other parts of the body or other pieces of clothing taken away from the main focus, which is the belt buckle. All those are examples of positive applications of this technique. For this segment, we will look at how this technique has been used for negative deception. Now let's look at how this technique has been used for the effective deception. Our first example is footage from the toppling of the Saddam Hussein statue in Iraq. This footage creates an illusion that not many people are familiar with.
But I guess the only weight of the statue is going to take care of the rest very soon. Here we go. Unbelievable. So there he's hanging.
It's hard to keep the people away. Chris Youngfeld.
Throwing rocks at him. And the pieces of metal, wood, whatever, their shoes. There's people in the park that are throwing whatever they can find. They're throwing it at this statue now from underneath.
Incredible sight.
That video creates the appearance like massive numbers of Iraqis were there. One may think the whole city is there depending on the perception. Now let's look at Al Jazeera's footage of the same event.
The statue was the height of about 4 men, and it required a large amount of manpower to pull it down.
This is MSNBC's footage several years later. This may not have been the same footage they showed on their channel during the event. Let's take a look at this one.
On countdown, on that day, it was ultimately American Marines who hoisted a chain around Saddam's statue's neck and then pulled it to the ground. But what we did not know is that the toppling of the statue was staged by an Army psychological operations team. Producer from the network Al Jazeera claims that the civilians we see stomping on Saddam's head and cheering their liberation were not even Iraqis, and anyone familiar with the various accents of the Middle East could tell you they were not Iraqis. So what actually happened in Firdos Square on April 9th, 2003, and what actually happened the same day in newsrooms and homes around this country? The pulling down of the statue may not have been premeditated psyops, or not very premeditated, more of an opportunity seized. But here's the question. Who were these psyops guys trying to influence? Iraqis or Americans or both? Both.
Last, here's a still photo of the event from a distance. If those video clips didn't illustrate the difference, this photo should. Should you ask yourself if you are looking at photographs or videos? If you can't see the borders or a faraway shot, you should be skeptical of the content until you can see the photo or video from all angles. A faraway shot of this event tells a different story from the close-up shots, which may have shaped a different narrative of the public opinion about the entire event. Our next example is MSNBC footage of armed protesters outside of President Obama's town halls. In this footage, they used tight framing to crop out the racial identity of the gun holder who was the premise of their discussion.
Yesterday, as President Obama addressed the veterans of foreign wars in Phoenix, a man at a pro-healthcare reform rally just outside wore a semi-automatic assault rifle on his shoulder and a pistol on his hip. The Associated Press reports about a dozen people in all at that event were visible carrying firearms. And the reason we're talking about this, a lot of talk here, Dylan, because people feel like, yes, there are Second Amendment rights for sure, but also there are questions about whether this has racial overtones. I mean, here you have a man of color in the presidency and white people showing up with guns strapped to their waist.
Okay, now, The argument they presented is that there is racial overtone to the protests, that a black man is president and large numbers of white people are protesting at his town hall armed with guns. Remember this as we go to the CNN footage of the same man.
Now, many of you yesterday were shocked when you saw right here for the first time that video that we showed you during an interview that I was doing with our senior White House correspondent, Ed Henry, of a man who had an AR-15 rifle with him just outside where the president was speaking. This was at an event in Phoenix. There's the picture again. He's right outside where the President of the United States is speaking. President Obama inside, this man outside. And you see that man conducting that interview right there? His name is Ernest Hancock. Mr. Hancock's good enough to join us now. Mr. Hancock, how are you, sir?
I'm fine. Thanks, Mr. Sanchez.
Is that you in that video that we were watching right there?
I'm not seeing the video, but I would imagine so, yes. I was there, and I interviewed the gentleman named Chris. This morning, for 2 hours, we had him on my radio show. And I'm also broadcast on the Republic Broadcasting Network, so
good for you.
A lot of people heard it.
Good for you. Let's listen to some of that interview, by the way, that you were doing yesterday, now that we've been able to get it on the internet. Here it is.
Is it your advocacy that by having guns here, we're probably all safer?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Did you know him? Did you just happen to come across him when you...
Oh, no. I've known Chris for, probably 2 years.
As you can see from the CNN clip, that there was actually two elements of deception for our discussion. One is separate from the overall topic of type framing, but still worth noting. The first is the full view of the man carrying a firearm is actually black, which renders the argument in the MSNBC clip as invalid due to it being based on the false premise that all the protesters carrying guns are white. Even though disproportionately the vast majority of all of the protesters are indeed white, this is not how they framed their argument for the discussion. What was the second element of deception? Well, we found out that the man of discussion was actually a staged plant. Maybe if the producers of the MSNBC clip were aware of this evidence, they wouldn't have deceptively framed the video shot, concealing the protesters' racial identity to support a false argument. Be skeptical of all camera shots and photographs. If a shot looks too close, or if you suspect there may be borders that are being concealed, then withhold casting judgment based on the evidence that was presented regardless of the source. And if you see a commentary discussion based off of video or photograph footage, be suspicious that the people discussing the issue may not even be aware that the evidence they are basing their conclusions from is a misrepresentation of reality.